Welcome to REIunite. I'm your host, and I'm here with Kristen, who's a well-known attorney in New Jersey and also an investor. Chris of the New Jersey Real Estate. Thanks for being on the show, Chris.
Pleasure to be here, Ryan. Good to talk to you.
All right, great. So today we're going to dive into the topic of wholesaling. A video with Jeff Watson, who met with the Ohio Department of Commerce Division of Real Estate, and they addressed many different things and different parts of wholesaling and what's legal and what is not. As I'm sure you know, when you have certain legislation passed in one state, sometimes it spreads very quickly to other states. So it's been a very hot topic in the wholesaling community. As you know, I do a lot of wholesaling myself, so it's something that we'd like to speak with those that are in the legal department and who are as advanced as yourself. That being said, one of the first topics that they addressed was contract red flags, and the summary is when a wholesaler enters in a contract with the sole intentions of just wholesaling the property and never buying it. And there's a couple terms that we can go over, but just on the surface level, how do you think that applies, if at all, to New Jersey and wholesaling in New Jersey, whereas a wholesaler, again, will just enter into contract, they have no intentions of ever buying it, and they're just going to go ahead and flip it to another cash buyer?
Sure. I mean, this is more important now than ever because we have this increased wholesaling. I've run the New Jersey Real Estate Investment Club for the last 14 years, and we're seeing a spike in wholesaling coming back. Over the last few years, wholesaling was big, then wholesaling dropped, now wholesaling is coming back as it's tied to more rehabbers, because wholesalers typically flip properties to those rehabbers, and as rehabbing's gotten hot, they've come in hot. So I did watch that video with Jeff Watson, who I know, and I think in Ohio they're a little bit more tight. They're a little bit more strict than they are here in New Jersey. I've heard of fines in Ohio, wholesalers actually being fined a lot of money. I haven't heard that happen in New Jersey, but it all comes down to intent. And so there's two real parts to this, right? So if you have an intent to buy a property, then you're covered. If you are actually willing to buy the property, if you are thinking about buying the property, but someone comes along and gives you a better offer. Classic example is I do a massive marketing, and I bring in a whole bunch of leads, and I'd be willing to buy each of these properties, but I've become overwhelmed. There's too many deals on the table, and I throw a couple of them out there that are good deals. I'd be willing to do those deals. But if I can flip it for next quick $10,000 or $20,000, then I take that off my table so I can focus on rehabbing and closing on the ones I actually have. If you actually have that intent and you're actually a rehabber, you're actually doing deals, then you're completely covered.
Right. Well, it seems that may pose a challenge, as I'm sure you know, the gurus who like to pitch their products and stuff. And anyone who actually comes to me and says, hey, how can I get started in wholesaling? I typically tell them, real estate investing, I tell them wholesaling is the way to go. You can get started with no credit, no money, and you basically get a property under contract and you sell it to a rehabber. And it seems that is either, I don't want to say coming to an end, but things are definitely changing. It seems that's a risky proposition to be engaged in, because someone who doesn't have any money is trying to flip a property. I mean, I guess proving intent would be the challenge on their end. But you're saying, so let me ask you this. For somebody who's getting started, they don't have any money, and they want to do wholesaling, are they kind of stuck, or would you?
Well, my suggestion is that they find a partner who is a rehabber to begin with, all right? Because if you've got a rehabber who is looking for a certain type of property, then you can target those property with your rehabbing partner, okay? You may not have the experience, you may not have the money, but if you've got a good deal, come to me. I'd be glad to partner with you. You can find deals that make sense for me. I love 3 families in Newark. I love 3 bedroom over 3 bedroom over 3 bedroom. So I've got wholesalers who have come in, partnered with me, and they go out and find my properties. And then it's great because they already have their buyer built in. And if I don't want the property, at least we had the intent, we had the intent to buy and the ability to close on those properties. If we wind up that we don't like the property for one reason or another, we have the ability to get out of it, but we had the proper intent to begin with.
Right. So let me elaborate on that a little bit. That's a great point. So let's say a new wholesaler approaches you. Hey, Chris, I'm coming across a lot of these leads, based off this new potential, we'll say, litigation or legislation that may come about. I want to protect myself. I want to partner with you. How would they go about moving forward? I mean, are they actually going to be locking the contract under their company or their name? Are you going to be doing it under your name? Because they're going to say, well, look, I'm partnering with Chris. Yeah, we have the intent. He has the intent. But when it comes down to it, if they're locked up under contract, let's say with their name, and they don't have the money, it'd be tough to them to prove that, why are they under contract or things along that line.
If you really want to joint venture with me or somebody like that, I suggest you form a new company with both partners' name on it.
Gotcha.
That way you've got the cred. And look, if the regulators ever come down and you're trying to prove intent, if I can show 3 or 4 properties that I have successfully bought, rehabbed, and resold, and this one got away, or we passed on this one for a number of reasons, I think you're completely covered. I think what you're really looking to avoid is practicing real estate without a license.
Right.
So there's all these licensing requirements. These people have paid a bunch of money to get their license. They don't want you taking all the benefits without going through all the hoops that they had. They have, the state wants certain requirements on those licensees. You are basically doing the job of a realtor without having those restrictions, without having that oversight, and that's what they're trying to avoid. So if it looks like you're practicing real estate without a license, then you are
In trouble.
at a risk of getting yourself in trouble.
Right. Okay. That makes great sense. I'm just going to go through here just some of the terms that were mentioned also in the video. Again, just want to get some of your feedback. One of which would be contingent upon finding another buyer.
Yes. You do not want to put that in writing anywhere. What you want to say is that I am an investor. I'm interested in purchasing your property. If I can get my financing contingency, if I have my inspection contingencies, you need to leave yourself some ways out of the deal. What I like to say is Christopher Goodson and/or an LLC to be formed, which allows me the ability to partner with other people. So if I have an LLC to be formed, it may be me and another joint venture partner, or it could be me assigning the property to another experienced rehabber.
Right. Okay. Now another one was seller must immediately vacate upon signing.
This is very dangerous. I do not encourage, for multiple reasons, people to do that. One, a vacant house to me is just asking for trouble. You're asking to get the property damaged. You're asking to. I don't think the house is more marketable. I think you're better off leaving that person in there. And if it doesn't work out, you haven't damaged them. Because if you ask somebody to move out of the house,
right,
and then you don't move forward with your contract, then that person could really bring a claim against you that that they relied upon your promise that you were going to close, and that they were damaged because they had to go rent the property somewhere else, or the property was damaged while there wasn't someone in the property during that time. I definitely wouldn't encourage that. And let me bring up something that wasn't in the video. And if you want to talk about really getting yourself in trouble, I've seen former clients of mine, and I cut and run as soon as I see this, where they'll start collecting rent on properties that they don't own. All right, don't do this. It's called equity skimming. Lots of guys, particularly in the Philadelphia area, got themselves in real big trouble. They went out, they tied up a bunch of properties, then they asked people to move out, then they put their own tenants in there, and then they collected rent. And their intent wasn't to sell it as quickly as they could, because they had the full incentive to drag that out as long as they could and ride that gravy train.
right.
That's where you're going to get arrested. That's where you're going to get people really coming down on you hard, and that's where you're going to get some jail time. So if you want a red flag to stay away from, if you know somebody who is renting out someone else's properties, if they don't own it, that's where you're really, really looking for trouble.
Right. There was a lot of problems with that during the foreclosure crisis, where they were vacating the property and people were coming in doing exactly what you're saying. They were collecting the rent, they weren't paying the mortgage, then they would foreclose on the house, and then the renters are going, what's going on here? So yeah, that's definitely a big no-no. Let me ask you this. So flex options, now those are pretty popular, especially amongst wholesalers. If I have a house under contract and another wholesaler wants to market as well, we typically do a flex option. A flex option is, as I'm sure you know, it's a half-page or one-page agreement that gives them the ability to market to their buyers, but it's an open-ended option where you don't have to sell to them. Meaning, if I get a buyer on my own, I don't have to sell to them. So what's your view on flex options, and what's your view on just regular option contracts?
I don't recommend either of those. You have to understand that all contracts are assignable unless they're specified otherwise. So if I put a contract on a property, I am now a contract vendee. I can sell my interest in that contract, okay, without it being an option contract. It's just a contract. It's a contract with contingencies, and that contract by its very nature is assignable. So once I have a contract, then I can assign this. And you see it very common in commercial, okay? This is a lot more common in commercial, and we've just kind of applied these principles to residential. But I don't do flex option contracts. I don't do option contracts. I do contracts.
Right.
I personally won't put a property under contract that I myself wouldn't be willing to rehab if I can get the price right or the amount of rehab is appealing to me.
Right. So two things I'd like to elaborate on that. One is, you said a contract is assignable. If a New Jersey contract doesn't specifically state that it is assignable, is it still assignable?
Yes. It has to specifically state that it is not assignable.
Okay, gotcha.
For you to not assign it.
Okay. I mean, that's something that's come up time in and time again, and that's what I originally thought. But I have dealt with some attorneys who say they want it in there, or they want the express approval from the seller to cover their ass.
If you're concerned, you write and/or assigns after your name. You can write Ryan and/or assigns in the name. You don't have to do that.
Right. Okay. Now, let me just ask you about the flex option. Let's say, again, I have a regular contract on a property. Someone else approaches me. They want to market it to their buyers. How can I legally and ethically give them equitable interest to take it to their buyers so that they're not acting as an agent illegally, they're acting as an equitable interest party holder? How can I do that? Or can I?
Oh, I mean, it's definitely a challenge because they don't have an interest in your contract. They would have to have, in order for them to market, they would have to have an interest in your contract. So I do not. I would like someone to clarify that as well. I don't do it. I don't support the flex option contracts.
Right. So, I mean, could there be a separate joint venture agreement saying that I work with this person? I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking, is there a possibility of coming up with a joint venture agreement that would protect them, or any workaround that would be more?
If you really have that kind of relationship, then you can add them onto the contract. You can do an addendum to the contract to put both your names on it. Now both of you have an equitable interest in that property. Now any member or any buyer listed on that property would have the right to sell their interest in the contract.
Okay.
But absent having actual contractual interest in the property, they're really acting as a broker and selling someone else's interest.
I gotcha. Okay. Another one was having the seller put in writing, says basically that the seller agrees to allow you, the buyer, to market, show, and sell the property. Now,
right. So you can market. You can't market the property itself. You can market your contractual rights. So you can post. I've got a contract on a 8-unit bedroom and 8 apartment building, 8-unit apartment building, and I'm willing to sell my interest in that contract. All right, that's completely legal. It's done in commercial all the time, so you can certainly apply that to a one-family. You cannot state or imply that you actually own the property. So you cannot list the property for sale. You cannot unless you have a deed. So if you have a deed to the property, now you're entitled. Now you can market the property. But absent that, it's not advisable.
So, okay, and actually that's what we were going to dive into shortly about marketing the property. So let's say I have a house under contract and I want to go ahead and take it to my buyers. What is the proper way to go ahead and market?
You have to say you're a contract vendee. So the term is contract vendee. You have to be very clear that you're not trying to sell them the property. You're trying to sell them your contractual interest in the property.
Okay, so let's elaborate further on that. Can I provide pictures of the house to show that the contract is for this property that I'm showing? Can I give the property address? What details can I get? Okay.
Absolutely. And here's where I and that video with Jeff Watson and I disagree. You have a contract to buy something. You have to be able to show what it is that you're buying. I'll give you an example. I can have a contract to buy soybeans, and I can show pictures of the soybean fields that I have got the contract for. I've got a contract for lumber. I can show samples of the lumber that I am selling. It's no different than the house. What you can't show is that you actually own the house. You have to specify that it's the contract that you are selling and not the house itself.
Okay, so pictures and the address is okay as well, just as long as you say that I'm a contract purchaser, Vendee.
Yeah.
Okay, and you would put that on all of the advertisements that you do.
Correct.
All right, great. That's something I would like to implement as well. I mean, this is good. I mean, there's a lot of different things that are out there that'll tell you to do something. I've been doing my way for a couple of years, and that's the importance of having these types of calls to see what's going on in New Jersey. I don't care really what's going on in California or Texas. I want to know what's working here.
Absolutely.
So that's great information. Another big thing was earnest money. Some people say, when they have contracts for $10, that's going to be a red flag. If it's $100, that's going to be a red flag. Now, obviously, this is situational, where Jeff Watson mentioned, okay, if there's a short sale situation, the property's over leveraged, putting $100 for that contract can be considered reasonable. Whereas a house is free and clear, and you're putting down $10 doesn't seem so reasonable. What's your view on earnest money, and is there any law in New Jersey that says that there's a certain amount that you have to put down, or what exactly is required?
And I wish they would give a percentage, or there's some kind of clarity. There is no special number, and it does have to do with the property. And one thing that Jeff Watson specified or brought up is if you are putting in the time and effort to negotiate with the bank for that discount, for example. Often this is done through short sales. If I'm going to negotiate a short sale, I'm putting in all that sweat equity into the deal, then to me that is just as much of a down payment as a larger deposit. Also, it may take 6 months, 9 months to negotiate that, and it's reasonable that I wouldn't want to have a large deposit tied up for 6 or 9 months. But what I am doing is I'm putting in effort into that transaction in order to make that contract feasible. Okay, there is no ability to sell that property before I enter the picture. Until someone from my team starts negotiating that short sale, that deal is not going to happen. So I'm putting down $100 and the sweat equity to make that transaction happen.
Okay, so now let me ask you this: how would that apply to, let's just say, a house that's has no mortgage, but it has a tax lien on it, an IRS tax lien, and I've negotiated IRS tax liens before. Now, let's just say the house is worth $250, and there's an IRS tax lien of $30,000, but I'm spending the time, effort, and energy to negotiate that IRS tax lien, and it's taking hours and hours and hours, but I still only have maybe $100 or $500 as my earnest money deposit. Would that same mindset be applicable here, or?
I would say yes, because you are negotiating. I assume you're not negotiating that tax lien for the benefit of the seller, right? So there's a $30,000 tax lien that you're trying to get down to $10,000. Who's going to benefit from that reduction? Not you. You're obviously going to be paying more than $30,000 for that property. If you were the sole person benefiting from that, then that might be a different story. But if you're negotiating down that tax lien so that the seller can derive a larger financial benefit, then you are adding additional benefit to that transaction, additional skin in the game. Your time and effort would be applied, and your intent to close. You wouldn't be putting in all this time and effort if you didn't really have intent to close on that. That's really what it comes down to, is intent.
Right. So you don't really have a rule of thumb as far as how much earnest money to put down. It's more along. It's basically situational.
It's definitely case by case, and they're going to look at everything in the totality of the situation. If you're a regular rehabber and you're buying properties all the time, and you've got a list, and you show that you put $100 down on the last 30 properties that you bought, rehabbed, and sold, and that this is your process and procedure, then they're not going to be able to argue that it's any different. Even if some of those properties you wound up not closing on, if you've got a track record, then the intent was obviously there to close. Again, what they're looking to avoid is somebody who's acting as a realtor without being a licensed realtor. So if a realtor could do what you're doing and they're licensed and you're not adding any benefit that the seller couldn't derive from just listing the property through a realtor, that's when you're going to come under scrutiny.
Right. I mean, I have my real estate license, so let me ask you another question. If I'm in these transactions, I'm not acting as an agent. I am licensed, but I'm not acting as an agent. I contract with the homeowner, and then I either rehab it or I wholesale it out. And on my contracts, I state that I am an agent. I'm not acting as an agent. I'm not representing anybody. A principal in the transaction. I'm disclosing that. Does that hurt me at all? Does that benefit me at all as far as being an agent and doing these transactions? No concern at all?
Yeah, I mean, I get that question a lot. And one, disclosure is absolutely critical. If they think that you're acting as an agent for their benefit and you're profiting from it, then other than the disclosed commission on the HUD, then you're really asking for trouble. But as long as you disclose it, you're basically safe. You're acting as a civilian. You're not, in that case, having a real estate license is only beneficial in the sense that you have access to MLS, you know what the comps are, you have the values of the property. I don't think it's necessary as a real estate investor to have a license. I let mine lapse. I had one when I started in the business just to have access to the MLS and meet a lot of people and network. I since I've let it lapse because I didn't feel it brought that much a benefit to my business, but my real estate investing business, that is. But I don't think it's a detriment either.
Right. Well, actually, that's a topic for another discussion in a situation that you're vaguely aware of, and we could discuss at another time. It actually did hurt me when talking to my broker when there was something that went on. That being said, when I do act as a principal in these transactions, just talking strictly wholesaling, there's been plenty of times where I've actually made less than if they listed it with an agent, and so just like you're saying, as long as you're disclosing everything, which we've been doing, it sounds like everything is okay and on the up and up. Chris, is there anything that you want to add as far as Jeff Watson's video that we didn't talk about, or perhaps maybe things that you see, do's and don'ts of other wholesalers out there that you'd like to elaborate on that maybe we didn't discuss?
Well, I think that it's a great time to get in wholesaling, but I would encourage, if you're only wholesaling in the beginning, partner up with a contractor, partner up with a real estate investor who's a rehabber, because that's really where the money's going to be. If you came to me and said, I want to be a real estate investor, how do I become like you? How do I build a real estate empire? Step one is find properties, flip them, find properties, flip them, find properties, flip them to your partner. You're much better off taking a piece on the back end than you are on the front. I see lots of times where these wholesalers $10,000 up front, when a partner might be willing to give them a 10% split on the back, which, yeah, you got to wait a little bit longer, but the profit potential is so much higher. And when you're doing that, when you're following the partner, don't just be passive. See how they're working that deal, because your next step is to become someone who rehabs. The true path to wealth is built on a long-term buy and hold strategy. And if you don't have the capital in the beginning, then the process is flip with your partner to get a piece of that equity in the background, follow, watch, see what he does, meet his contractors, see his processes, and to the point where you've got enough capital where you can do your own deals. So flip with your partner for an equity position until you've got enough capital behind it you can flip for yourself. And then as you're flipping, you're going to come across deals that are too good to let go. So now it's flip, rehab, flip. You know what? Take this one and keep it.
Exactly.
And build that portfolio, that long-term portfolio. And we are in a historical period where that's better than it has been in a very, very long time. There's opportunities in Jersey City, Newark, and Elizabeth. Those are my 3 top towns where you can buy cash flow positive properties that are going to appreciate substantially over the next couple of years. And I bought my first apartment building in 2001. I bought 8 units and a storefront. the Greenville section of Jersey City. Next year I bought an 8-unit in Hoboken. The year after that I bought an 8-unit and a storefront in Hoboken. And I started out in apartment buildings, but I have now switched my focus to 2s and 3s. And the reason why I focused on the 2s and 3s is because guidelines are really tight right now, okay? Which means that there's very few people who buy in this market. But as those guidelines open up, and believe me, eventually they're going to have to open up. Look, guidelines were here, all right? Guidelines were way too big, and we all know what happened. Now guidelines are here, and they shouldn't be here either. They have to move out here. And when that happens, the people who are going to benefit from that increase and looseness of guidelines, still reasonable. I'm not talking stated 620 credit scores. I'm talking about reasonable increase in guidelines are those first-time home buyers who are beginning to enter the market. And they buy 2 and 3 families to supplement that income. But here's the difference. I buy a 2 and 3 family based on the cash flow. They're going to buy that 2 and 3 family as a property that they're going to live in, and that rent is just supplementing. What that means is that they're willing to pay a lot more for that property than an investor. And they can qualify for a mortgage that's a lot larger. When I bought my 8-unit, and then I sold my 8-unit 7 years later, the only appreciation really came from me pushing those rents up. The bank won't allow you to buy wrong, all right? They're watching that cap rate. They are restricting on what you can buy. They're going to value that 8-unit building on the cash flow, while a purchaser of a 3-family, their lender, their FHA lender, their Fannie or Freddie lender, they're not watching that cash flow. They care about the income of the person who's buying it. So one more time, what this means is that I can buy as an investor during the next few years, hold those properties for positive cash flow, and then when those guidelines open up, there's going to be a slingshot effect of new buyers entering in that market, buying these 2s and 3 families because they're the entry market properties, and they're going to pay substantially more, which means as opposed to buying an apartment building, pushing those rents up over a little bit of time, and then reselling it, I'm going to have a bigger jump in that price. So I think it's a really great time to focus on 2s and 3 families. Again, places with access to Manhattan, Jersey City, Newark, Elizabeth.
Excellent. That's excellent info, and that's definitely an eye-opener. And just as you mentioned, I mean, the path as far as wholesaling, it's the same path that I was on. Started off wholesaling with partners, slowly got into the rehabs, and then it's 1, 2, 3 rehabs, pick up one to hold. 1, 2, 3 rehabs, pick up another one to hold. And that's really the game plan. Excellent. Chris, I really appreciate you being on the show. Would you mind telling our listeners how they can get in touch with you if they're interested in having you represent them for any real estate transactions, how they can get in touch with you to partner with you, and also how they can go to your monthly meetings at your REIA club?
Sure. I run the New Jersey Real Estate Investment Club. Website is njreclub.com, njreclub.com. We meet the third Wednesday of every month, have been for a very long time. It is an hour of networking, an hour of a guest speaker, another hour of networking, no pitch, no upsell, no credit card machines. And I really use that to generate business for my law practice, which is Goodson Law Offices, goodsonlawoffices.net. You can read all about the firm there. We did 46 closings last month, 48 the month before that. We're going to be up around 45 again this month. So we're seeing a real strong demand for real estate. And again, that's almost all real estate investors. We don't do a lot of Jones Sousa's.
Excellent. Chris, I really appreciate it. A lot of great information, and I look forward to having you on again.
You got it, Ryan. Great talking to you.
Take care.